Oh, hi. Did I set up our camping tent in our living room just for this bit? Yes, I did. So you're welcome. You're welcome to the cats too, because the cats have thoroughly enjoyed it this morning. I was actually going to sit on the cooler, but if I did, it would actually make me too tall for once. So I'm just sitting on the ground. I had nothing in the house that I could sit on to raise me up a little bit. So we're on the ground, you're on the ground. Well, you're on a tripod, but you're on the ground. You're coming down to my level, okay? That's where we're at today. So we have finished our first session of summer camp, and I figured we'd go over some of the books. I actually ended up reading 4 books. I originally had 3 books picked out, but I got through them fairly quickly and still had a pretty good amount of time by the end of June. So I picked up a 4th book and said, all right, we'll just add this one to the list. Summer camp themed, why not? So the 4 books that I ended up reading for June for camp session number 1 were The Lake by Natasha Preston, The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, The Counselors by Jessica Goodman, and then the last one that I picked up just on a whim was The Lost Girls of Camp Forevermore by Kim Fu. This is really fun. I should camp out in the living room more often. And it gives me practice on actually setting the tent up because we didn't get to go camping in June. I'm hoping that maybe in August, because July is a little busy and probably it'll be really hot. So maybe like August, September, and then I'll be able to set up the tent a lot faster. So we're just gonna go through the books one by one. Beyonce's coming into the tent. That's why it's moving. Originally, I had taken a ton of notes for each book, like an absurd amount of notes, because I just wanted to keep track of who was who and what was going on and who was involved in what shady business. And I was going to do a more thorough, in depth, and pretty spoilery review of each book. But then I stopped and went, each of these books is a thriller, and while there's a chance that a lot of people have already read at least some of these books, there's also a very high chance that people have not read any of them, or maybe one of these books is on their TBR, because I know The God of the Woods has been super popular, or at least I don't know when it came out, but I've heard a lot about it recently. Instead of doing a really thorough, in-depth, super spoilery review of each book, we're still going to go into each book, but do a not as spoilery review, and it kind of like semi-spoilery. There might be a couple things here and there, but part of the fun of a thriller is trying to guess who did it and what the actual like big secret is and the big mystery. And that's no fun if you tune in and go, "Oh, this book was on my TBR and I'm really excited to learn about it." And then I just go, "Here's what happened." That's no fun for anybody. So instead of that, we're going to do maybe like light spoilers, but we're not going to spoil the big surprise. You're going to have to find out on your own. She's going to help us with the reviews today, right? She's really enjoying the tent. So I figured we would just go book by book and start out with what it's about and with my thoughts and what the final rating I gave it was. The first book that I read was The Lake by Natasha Preston, and this takes place at Camp Pine Lake down in Texas. It follows 2 girls, Kayla and Esme. Foreshadowing of what happens and what I think of the book. Miss Ma'am, no. We don't need to do that. That's Beyonce's opinion of this book, but here's mine. So we follow Kayla and Esme, and from what the author is telling us, they are ride or die. They are the absolute BFF forever. So I guess I'd be BFFF. They're both former campers, and they only went a couple of times. Now they're about 17 or 18 years old. I had to kick Beyonce out of the tent. She is just in a mood, and she has strong opinions about the books. Following Kayla and Esme, former campers turned counselors in training. Kayla and Esme received pamphlets saying, "Come back to Camp Pine Lake, or you'll regret it," which is kind of weird to do. It's a weird take to threaten your potential employees to ask them to come back to work for you. So that was a choice. Kayla and Esme, they get to camp. It's like the week before camp, so kind of like a maintenance week to get everything ready for the campers. They get to camp, and we get little bits and pieces of hearing about this really bad thing that happened at camp 10 years ago. And it was something they were involved in. It's a big secret. Nobody knows except for them. And true to thrillers, we're not going to find out about it right at the start. It's probably going to take most of the book. So we meet the other CITs, the counselors, the guy in charge of the camp. Two of the other CITs are these like typical cute high school guys. So you get a little mini romance between Kayla and Esme and the two boy CITs. And that's a little bit of a running theme throughout, but not overtly so, which is fine because I don't really prefer romance in any of my books. I understand why Esme gets so fixated on what happened at the camp, this big secret that they're hiding, because they're back at the place where it happened. And it sounds like a really big deal. And again, as we go along, we get little more bits and pieces. Esme keeps trying to talk to Kayla about it and keeps trying to ask her questions, and because they think there may have been one other person who might have known what happened, because turns out they were also there at the big secret moment. Kayla just keeps pushing her away. She doesn't want to talk about it. She wants to essentially forget about it and just pretend it never happened. It's causing a little bit of strife between the two girls. And that's boiling over into the little mini romance we get between Esme and the other guy CIT, because the whole book is from Esme's point of view. So we're getting a lot of internal monologue, internal thoughts about, what's going on at camp, her relationship with Kayla, the big secret that she's hiding, and, are they going to be able to keep it a secret and no one find out while they're here? To be honest, if you have this big, massive, like crazy secret about something you did at this location, I'm not sure I would go back and work there. That's a little weird, but we all make our choices. And that's your own path. That is your journey to make. Who are we to judge? So camp is going on. The campers have arrived. It's time for, 2 months or however long this camp is. And weird things start to happen. And the one other person that potentially could know what happened with the big secret 10 years ago, Kayla and Esme, well, Kayla's not concerned at all, but Esme is dead convinced that this other person is behind all the weird stuff happening. She's convinced that they've followed them here, that they're threatening them and trying to take the camp down. And Kayla's like, girl, you need to calm down. You need to chill. So Kayla's completely unconcerned. Esme is concerned for enough of 10 people total. And the weird stuff at first is just kind of brushed off as pranks, because at first it's just affecting the counselors, and the things that could have been seen by the campers, the counselors make sure to hide it, get rid of the evidence. And the counselors are like, it's probably just a prank war. Like, it happens every single year. Not a big deal. Until weirder stuff starts happening, like dolls lying in the lake with X's over their eyes. That's a little more weird. Probably not a prank anymore. And then we finally get the big reveal. We have gotten just little snippets, little bits and pieces to add to the story of what happened 10 years ago. And while we don't get the full story until closer to the end, it's still pretty far off from the end. We still have a good bit of the book to go when we find out what the secret is. And the secret was such a non-issue. It was so underwhelming. It's really just such a weak and boring reveal. I shouldn't call it a non-issue because it could have been worse had things gotten out of hand. It was just so underwhelming when I finally read it. I remember going, is that it? I really don't think that the author could have come up with a more boring reveal than if they had just used like ChatGPT. I kept waiting throughout the whole book for more information to come through, because I just remember going, this can't be it. This is probably like the main thing, but they're probably burying the lead. There's got to be something else that's really going to kick it up a notch and make it way worse, like 10 times worse than what it really is. Or so I thought. That was it. The boring reveal was the big secret. It just made the second half of the book, honestly, I was just ready to be done with it, because at that point, what else was there to know? The second half of the book, a lot of things happened, and I was just really disappointed with the direction the book was taking. I can't even say pretty much anything that happened because it would give a lot away. I was after the big reveal and then seeing where the author was going with this and trying to make sense of what was going on. It just felt like the author was trying to randomly create a bunch of gotcha moments just for the surprise factor because it really didn't make any sense. All of the things that happened after the big reveal really just, I was like, how does this tie in? How is this gonna work? This makes no sense with between the big secret and what's going on now. We do get a fade to black at the end, and it does leave you not really with a cliffhanger. It's more of an open ending, which I don't mind. I love a good open ending. I love a good cliffhanger. But this one just didn't really hit for me. The whole ending felt a bit rushed. Again, it felt like they were trying to create a bunch of gotcha moments that really didn't tie in. It was like, oh, this is how the book could have gone. These are all the ideas I could have had to make it really surprising and really shocking for the reader. Just tried to cram a bunch of stuff in at the end and then do a fade to black. And it just didn't hit the way that the author, I assume, was trying to make it. And it didn't hit for me, which really was disappointing because if you can do an open ending well and leave me going, oh, I wish I had more, or kind of debating in my head, oh, did this happen? Oh, did that happen? Oh, maybe this other thing happened. I love that. I would absolutely keep reading more of your stuff. From a very underwhelming secret to a rushed and chaotic end of the book, a really kind of underwhelming fade to black as well, because at that point, when the book ends and how it ends, I was going, okay, well, you could kind of see it coming. So even the ending was a bit underwhelming, which is disappointing. I was reading through some of the comments on Storygraph after I finished the book, and one comment nailed it on the head. The comment said that it felt like the author was trying to make a mountain out of a molehill with this big reveal, and that's exactly how I felt, because I kept waiting, even until the very end of the book, to go, that can't be it. They're going to drop some last little bit of knowledge that, again, was burying the lead, and it's going to just amplify this big secret of why it was such a big deal. And that never happened. The big secret was the big secret, and that was all there was to it. And it just was a really big letdown. It made the latter half of the book really boring and kind of took away from the potential mystery of big secret, no one knows what happened, and how it affects these girls who are coming back to the place where the big secret happened. It was just really not exciting. I ended up giving this a 2.5. Originally, I gave it a 3, but after I kind of sat on it and thought about it for a day or so, I ended up knocking it down. And I think it was the really bland secret and the overall ending of the story that knocked it down for me. 2.5 feels more generous than a 3. And I'm not a person who rates books low. It doesn't take a lot for me to be really entertained by a book. I can only think of, on one hand, I could count the number of times I've rated a book under 3 stars. I have a pretty simplistic rating system. So for me to rate something lower than a 3, you really have to not be great. The Lake was an easy read, pretty fast read, but overall more disappointing than I was hoping for. So I might give the author a second chance, but this doesn't really bode well to me for any future works, but I could be wrong. Who knows? 1 summer camp book down, 3 to go. Not off to the strongest start, but that's okay. We have 3 more books to go. It could get better. Hopefully it gets better. You know, sitting on the floor is not super comfortable. Who would have thought? The God of the Woods, 5 stars. That's 10. I would give it 10 though. Easily 5-star summer book for me. Had me in a vice grip the entire time. I didn't want to put it down. I took a silly amount of notes for this book because there were a lot of people, a lot of places, a lot of different timelines, and there was just a lot of information to keep up with. So while originally I was planning on doing a more thorough deep dive on this book and doing a lot of spoilers, this one I really would love everyone to read this book on their own. So, but even still, with the notes, I found myself going back a couple of times while I was reading to go, okay, wait, who is that character again? Or wait, I thought this happened during this time. So it still ended up being a good idea for me to take a bunch of notes. So The God of the Woods takes place at Camp Emerson in the Adirondack Mountains in New York State. And the camp it's owned and run by this super ultra rich banking family, the Van Laars. We actually end up covering a pretty wide time span, I believe from like 1960 or 1961 to the present time of the book of June, July, and August of 1975, which is when Barbara Van Laar goes missing. Bear, Barbara's younger brother, also went missing in the same area, but 14 years prior. And while police have closed that case and they've supposedly caught the guy who did it, Bear's body was never recovered. The author did such an amazing job of weaving multiple stories together, multiple stories, multiple POVs, and multiple timelines. There's a big focus on Alice, who is Barbara and Bear's mother, on Louise, who is Barbara's counselor at the time that she goes missing, and then Judita, who is the lead detective on the case for Barbara. Some of the backstories, because we get a lot of backstories, especially with these three characters, were just absolutely heartbreaking to read, especially Alice's and Louise's. Alice, I kept going back and forth on her because you do see how her environment has created the person that she was growing up and the person that she is in present day. And while it's so heartbreaking to see how her environment shaped her and how she then thinks, okay, well, this is how I have to act, this is how I have to be as a person, you just get so upset when you see that line of thinking reflected in her actions towards her daughter, which is even more heartbreaking. It's so frustrating, and in so many different ways, because it's frustrating because it's not fair to Barbara, but it's also frustrating because that's how the people around Alice shaped her outlook on life. It's a mess. Poor Alice is a mess. While the premise of the book is about Barbara's disappearance in the current year of 1975, we do end up looking back into Bear's story and everything surrounding his disappearance 14 years prior. We get to see new facts and new clues unfold in real time while Judita, who is the main detective on Barbara's case, while she searches for Barbara and gets to unfold all these new discoveries and secrets about Bear's case that have been locked away and forgotten about intentionally for many, many years. I did end up making a guess about what happened with Bear, and I would say I was 90% right. There were just a few details I didn't nail. But with Barbara, I didn't guess the ending at all until literally right before the author revealed it. Every time I thought I was getting somewhere and had clues in my little Scooby-Doo notebook, and I was going, okay, I've got clues. I've got potential people who we need to keep an eye on. The author would just turn around and go, surprise, you thought. The endings for both kids was so satisfying in two totally different ways. Bear's was satisfying in a very tragic and sad way, while Barbara's was also sad in a way, but very freeing. And God, it was just so good. Both endings, 10 out of 10. But the endings for the kids, and ending for the book too. You get 3 different perspectives throughout the book. Technically you get 4, but the 4th one is Tracy, who ended up being Barbara's bunkmate while she was at camp. And we don't get a ton of perspective from Tracy. Most of the POVs from Tracy are in the first part of the book, because when Barbara goes missing, all the campers have to get sent home, including Tracy. In the second half of the book, Tracy is not as present as she was in the beginning. And it's not that I forgot about Tracy, because you do get a tiny little bit of Tracy POV at the very end, but she was definitely pushed to the back of my mind after she was sent home, because she's no longer the focus. Which, oh, I just put that together, actually. We make just connections left and right while we're talking about books. Amazing. So while Tracy wasn't a very big point of view character, she was still important to have. Tracy was used as kind of a way for the reader to get a limited first person point of view, kind of Barbara adjacent, because the land that the camp is on is just down the road from the Van Laar family home. And this is the first time that Barbara's been to camp, really the first time that Barbara's been away from her family's influence. And I use away loosely because she's just down the road from the house, so she's not technically really super far from her family, but she's out from under the direct influence. And we get to see through Tracy how Barbara acts when she's not directly under the influence of her family, and how she has to act when she's around her family and towards her family, when she's finally able to just be Barbara on her own. Tracy's chapters really felt like a way to give us a Barbara adjacent point of view without necessarily having Barbara's point of view as chapters themselves. And the connection I just made was that we have Tracy's point of view in the first half of the book. It's because Barbara's there. They're bunkmates. They're both at camp. But then when Barbara goes missing, obviously the campers have to go home, including Tracy. And so Barbara's absent. Tracy's absent. So Barbara's point of view is no longer there. So we lose that point of view. And I just made that connection now. And that's just so clever. That was so good to include, because we get a little bit of Tracy's point of view at the end. And I'm going to let you make the connection with that as you will, because Tracy and Barbara are so connected, which is why we have Tracy's point of view when Barbara's around. You just need to read this book. That was such a good connection that the author did. I can't recommend this book enough. This is one that I could absolutely see myself rereading and then going back through, taking notes, doing a little annotating so I could try to see the path of like, okay, I see where we're going. I see how the author's trying to mislead me here, but here's what's actually happening. This was such a great book. This was easily a 5-star, and what a great way to kind of come after a book that wasn't so great at the very beginning. My foot is falling asleep. But you shouldn't sleep on this book. This is just, spoiler here, this was the best book I read out of the 4 for session number 1. Not that it goes completely downhill from here, but it doesn't go higher. This is the top of the mountain. We can't go any higher from this. I had to get up and walk around. My foot was falling asleep. We are on to our next book, which is The Counselors by Jessica Goodman. All of the imagery and the descriptions of the camp and the grounds, everything about it brought back such strong memories for my time at camp. And I think that's probably part of the reason why I rated it as high as I did. If it's working for it, it's working for it. So credit where credit is due. This book takes place at Camp Alpine Lake, and the book bounces between the current events at Camp Alpine Lake and then the previous fall with Goldie. We learn throughout the book, and we actually find out pretty quickly what happened with Goldie over the fall and winter and the spring leading up to camp, and what big secret that she's hiding from her 2 best friends. Goldie has been dodging her friends' calls, their messages for months now, which is leading to a little bit of a rift between the girls, because Camp Alpine Lake is for super rich kids. And not just rich kids, but super rich counselors, CITs, directors. Besides Goldie and her parents who also work at the camp, every single person there, campers and counselors included, are just dripping money. So we have a little bit of a rift between the girls. They're trying to keep things how it was because it's their first year as CITs. They've been campers since they were very small, and they're trying to keep that camper vibe alive, but the vibe is off just enough to make it just a little bit weird between the 3 of them. That crack in the friendship just grows as we go throughout the book. You know what I just realized? I hope that there's no bugs or anything that have been hiding out in this tent, because it's been well over a year since we used it, but you never know. Roaches can survive anything, so there might be a bug that survives somehow, and I'm hoping that's not the case. And I just thought about it after sitting in here for a good amount of time. Don't like that thought. Let's go back to the book. So the 3 girls are at camp, the weeks are going by, and then one morning we wake up with no morning announcement, which is weird because the guy who owns the camp, he is on top of morning announcements. Counselors and CITs are rushed to a little meeting, and we find out that a local boy has washed up on the shore of the lake and been found dead overnight. And that local boy is Goldie's ex-boyfriend. The police and the family, they're all calling it an accidental drowning, which does not match with what his friends and the entire town know about the kid, because he's like He's one of these small town golden boy top tier athletes. So him swimming and then accidentally drowning, the math ain't mathin'. And it also doesn't make sense doubly to Goldie because she saw one of her best friends, Ava, go that night and meet the ex-boyfriend down at the lake. Girl, what you doing down there? That's weird. This is really where it starts to get a little more fun, classic camp murder and more rich people doing shady shit. It's a semi-goofy timeline with a semi-goofy ending, but just to not spoil anything, each of the three girls, the other best friend, her name is Imogen, or Imogene? I don't know. We'll say Imogene. Imogen? They call her Emo, so that's what I'm going to call her. It turns out each of the three girls has been keeping a secret from the others. Spoiler alert, that does not affect anything. Emo's is the literal most boring secret in the entire world. The girls have a come to Jesus. They share their secrets. Lots of hugs, crying, they're best friends again, everything's fine. And the three of them team up because Goldie's been doing a little digging to try to find out what actually happened with the ex-boyfriend. And the other two girls are like, bet, say less, we're going to help you out. The book was pretty fast paced from the beginning, but it really cranked it up a notch at the end, especially when they all shared their secrets and then had a little campfire together and start trying to solve a mystery. The Counselors was fun. It was a bit of a bummer that there were more rich people shenanigans in play than the summer camp murder that I was expecting, but overall, I still had a good time. It was interesting to see how Goldie views the camp and how it affects her life versus how the camp is viewed through her best friends who are super rich, because we get two totally different points of view on the not just the camp itself and what it means to Goldie and to Emo and to who's the other one? Ava. Because not only do we get two different perspectives on what the camp means to Goldie, who's a townie and definitely not rich, versus what it means and what it represents to the mega rich friends, but both of those perspectives on how the camp affects the town, because the town ain't doing so hot. The town could use a little bit of extra money. And to see these two kind of warring perspectives, especially from a financial standpoint, was really interesting. I enjoyed seeing how two different types of people can see the same place and then how money can influence how you remember that place. I ended up giving this one a 3.5. I think what bumped it up was all of the imagery surrounding the camp itself. The author nailed the camp imagery and the sights, the smells, the sounds, all of it, except for being the filthy rich part. I don't have any memories of that. Wish I did, but I don't. Not the best, but still not bad. It was a good time overall. Now this next book. The Lost Girls of Camp Forevermore was the most annoying and disappointing book I have read so far this year. There are some books that after I read them, I go, you know, maybe I just didn't get it. Maybe I missed something. But that means there has to be something to miss. And this book had nothing from start to finish. Let's just get my immediate annoyances out of the way. The pacing was all over the place. The whole book felt disjointed. The traumatic events from the girls weren't connected in any way, and the timelines made no sense. The way the book is narrated is also kind of strange. At the beginning of the book, it seems like we're following around Siobhan, who is a new camper, but at the same time, it also feels like we're following this third-person general point of view. I don't know, it was weird. I also didn't like that. The nonsensical pacing starts right at the beginning of the book. And just for reference, the 5 main characters of the book that we're following are Siobhan, Nita, Andy, Isabel, and Dina. I'm going to do what the author should have done and start by focusing on the camp stuff first before focusing on the random interludes from each girl. Because what we would get is a very small little tiny chapter about the kayak trip gone wrong before getting interrupted by this ridiculously long chapter from one of the girls that in no way connected to the actual event. I think the chapters were supposed to show how the event affected them during the rest of their lives, but that's not what happened. It was just a bunch of babbling in between chapters about the kayaking trip. Just a bunch of nothing. This one might have a few more spoilers than the other two, so if you are still interested in reading this book by the end of this, skip to the end of the video. I'll put the timestamp on the screen. The whole premise of this book is about these 5 campers, the ones I mentioned earlier, who go to this summer camp that's located right on the ocean, and they're going to go on an overnight kayaking trip. They're supposed to just kayak to an island, an uninhabited island, set up camp, camp overnight, come straight back. Obviously, things go wrong. The girls end up lost, and then trauma ensues, or is supposed to ensue. I don't really think it did. That's what the author wanted, but we didn't quite get there. We'll start off again with the camp stuff first, because it's really hard to understand what exactly happened, why it was supposed to be so traumatic, and because we don't get the full story until the very end of the book. While I could appreciate the author trying to kind of stretch out the event and keep you guessing as to what happened, this just had me going, how am I supposed to know how that affects the girls when I don't even know what actually happened? But I'm getting ahead of myself, kind of like the author did. Day 1, the kids arrive. Not much else happens. Day 2, they have a swim test. And the swim test is in the morning. In the afternoon, they have like kayaking lessons. And one short afternoon of kayaking lessons apparently means every single camper is ready to go on this kayaking overnight trip. At least half of these kids have never been to camp before. At least half of them have probably never been in a kayak, but okay. Because guess what? It's day 3 and we're going on a kayak adventure. Sure, Jan. The campers are all divided in groups of 5 plus a counselor. Siobhan is paired with these other 4 campers, and her counselor's name is Jan. Jan has been around at this camp for a hot minute. Everybody knows her, everybody loves her. She's supposedly super knowledgeable. She's had a lot of experience. So she shouldn't fuck this up, right? One would think. The plan is for each group to go to one of these little uninhabited islands that kind of dots the coast of the camp. They just go there, and these islands aren't close. They're a couple hours of kayaking away. So they go to the island, set up camp, go home. Should be easy peasy, right? Should be, unless you're Jan. So Siobhan's group starts out kayaking, and they make really good time because Jan, the counselor, just keeps pushing the girls. She is pushing the pace. She wants to go faster. And they finally arrive at their predetermined island after about 3 hours of kayaking. Now these girls, all the girls at the camp, are about 9 to 11 years old. So they're not very old. They're still pretty young. Each girl has her own kayak. They don't even share kayaks. So when the girls get to the island, after 3 hours of hard kayaking in the ocean, they're exhausted, and rightfully so. And you know what would be even better? Jan's great idea of saying, hey, we made really good time. We should go to the big island. Girl, what? None of the girls want to go to the big island for 2 reasons. 1, they're completely exhausted because it's another like 2 to 3 hours of kayaking from their current island to the big island. And then 2, the girls view going to the big island as cheating because the big island has a small town. And so the whole point of this kayak trip was to go to an uninhabited island, no potential help, and have an overnight camping trip. If you're camping on an island with a town with help just in case something goes wrong, that's not the same thing. But Jan's like, don't worry about it. We're gonna go. And so she pushes the girls and they go to the big island. So these kids have been kayaking for like 5 to 6 hours. Really? Come on, Jan, do better. This was the first thing that annoyed me because if the author had reversed this plot point, it would have given more urgency to everything that followed. Because if the whole plan had been, hey, let's go camp on this inhabited island where there's potential help nearby, and then the counselor goes, I have a better idea. Let's go to this uninhabited island where we're not supposed to be and no one's going to know where we are, and then shit starts going down, that would have made things more interesting. So the author is giving themselves a very boring out right off the bat. They paddled to the big island. The kids are exhausted. The kids are tired. They don't care anymore. And they just kind of let Jan handle everything. They're very hands off. Jan has to pull all of the kayaks up on the shore. She's got to set up camp. She does send the girls to get kindling and stuff for firewood. And she also goes out to start collecting firewood, and when she comes back, she has this random large wound on her leg. Doesn't explain it, just kind of tries to hide it from the kids, and we all go to sleep. Here's where we get a little bit more of a spoiler. The kids wake up the next morning and Jan is dead. No explanations, just dead. Okay. Conveniently, the kayaks that were pulled up onto shore were not secured properly, so they have floated out into the ocean. So they have no way home. They're just stuck on this inhabited island. Isabel, for some bizarre reason, just cannot accept that Jan is dead and decides to stay with the body just on the off chance that maybe someone is going to go by in a boat and then she can flag them down and go send them and be like, hey, my friends are off in the woods. Can you go find them? And the other 4 girls are going to go try to find help in the town. Now, the author has Jan and the girls kind of make comments that the big island is pretty big. Like, the other uninhabited islands are smaller. So the girls are going, okay, well, we're on a beach, and Jan made sure that we were not going to be close to the town. So we're just going to walk east, and then hopefully on the other side of the island, that's the town, and then we can get help. They take half the supplies, start walking. Before the end of the day, they get to the other side of the island, and there's nothing there. It's just a beach. So they've gone in the wrong direction. They didn't know. That's fine. Right there, I'm like, is the big island that big that these 4 smaller kids are able to traverse at least half the island in one go in less than a day? And you might go, well, Kristen, maybe the island is longer rather than just like one big circle. True. That could be true, but even still, I just don't buy it. Obviously, the kids are hungry, they're tired, still a little bit scared, and they make camp for the night. And here's where I thought something was about to go down, because while 3 of the girls are working on setting up the tent that they've taken, Dina sneaks off and essentially just eats all the food. The food that they have left and that they've taken with them to last them until they find the town, Dina's eaten it all, because she's just so hungry she cannot wait. And the other 3 girls get really pissed. They tie up her hands behind her back, and I was like, all right, shit's going down. We're going to get some action. No, they just get mad at her, yell at her, tie up her hands, and then everybody goes to sleep. That's it. I was expecting maybe some rash decisions to be made, some things done and said out of anger, but nope, just everybody went to bed. Everybody goes to bed mad. That's the big deal. Yet another miss from the author. Popping back to little Isabel over on the beach for a second. The whole day on the beach while the girls are walking to the other side of the island, she's just hanging out. Nothing happens. So she's just hanging out on the beach by herself. Then, surprise, 2 dudes in a boat just happen to go by where she's at, and she's jumping up and down, making a lot of noise. They see her come up on the beach, and they're like, oh my God, are you okay? And she's like, oh my God, no. Counselor's dead, and the other ones are trying to look for help, and they're like, yo, that's wild. So she's fine. Isabel managed a whole day on her own. Boring. Sorry I keep shifting around. It's really uncomfortable to sit on the floor. Should have thought that through, but I didn't. Kind of like these kids. They wake up the next day. We're going back to the other 4 kids now, and they're gonna head north. So they head north. They're trying to cut across the stream, and they see this little bear cub playing in the water, 2 of them. And they go, okay, well, that's not good because Mama Bear's probably around. They try to back up. Siobhan trips over air, I guess, and like falls down, gets tangled up in a tree branch. One of the cubs comes up to kind of check her out. Then both cubs notice Mama Bear's coming back, and they're like, oh, cool, Mom's home. That's when Siobhan hears the other 3 girls whispering, because Siobhan's got the tent, she's got the backpack with like the trail mix, the only thing that Dina didn't eat. She has all the stuff on her person. The other 3 girls are going, okay, do we try to go in there, grab the backpack, and get out of here? Or do we try to save her? Except they're not actually thinking about the second part. They're debating on just either making a break for it and running away from the bear, leaving Siobhan, leaving the tent, leaving everything, or if they should try to at least go and get the backpack and then bounce. They weren't going to save Siobhan, which is wild. But I was like, okay, here we go. We're going to get a little bit of animosity. We're going to get something happening here, because now we've got 2 warring factions, basically. Because I don't know about you, but even in this situation with a bear charging at me and I have all the stuff in my backpack, these other people are going to leave me. On the one hand, I'm like, okay, don't blame you. But on the other hand, if I make it out of this, I'm going to be pissed. So after the cub leaves Siobhan and starts heading back across the river, Mama Bear's charging at them. Of all people, Nita, who has just been butting heads with Siobhan the entire time, runs over, like, helps Siobhan get out of this tangled mess. They end up having to leave the backpack and they run away, but Siobhan also manages to somehow break her ankle standing up. I had to read that section like 3 times and I still don't really understand. She basically just tries to push up off the ground with her feet to stand and then her ankle breaks. But okay, with adrenaline, all the girls run away from a bear and they outrun it. So these 4 young kids manage to outrun a full-grown bear, and then they manage to make it to an open field, make camp for the night. And when Siobhan wakes up the next morning, the other 3 are gone. This part makes sense to me. Siobhan cannot walk. Her ankle is completely broken. She would have slowed the other 3 down. So they went to go find help, and then Siobhan's just the whole last chapter just kind of like rolling around in the field. She has this memory of being taught in school about how some graves would be decorated with flowers, and so she picks a bunch of flowers in the field, chains them together, and makes herself like a crown and a necklace and bracelets, and then just lays in her sleeping bag waiting for death, I suppose. And then, oh, look at that, magically saved. On that note, the author can't even be bothered to show us how the rest of the rescue mission plays out, because all we get is that Siobhan hears the rest from news stories, she sees the footage. You can't even be bothered to show us. They've made it this far and they're so close to finding help, and we just skim over that. Also boring. So we don't find out all of this information until the very end of the book. The very last chapter is where like the bear and the rescue happens. So keep that in mind. We don't know what big traumatic event actually goes down. We just get very small bits and pieces throughout the book. And I went back and counted the amount of pages that focused on the camp, the kayaking trip, the rescue, all of that was 69 pages. Nice. The remaining 179 pages was just dramatic fluff. So we get 4 chapters that interrupt this kayak trip. Nita, Dina, Isabel, and Kayla. But wait, I thought you said Andy was the 5th camper. She is. Andy's whole point of view chapter is told from her sister's point of view, Kayla, who has never gone to camp and was not on this trip at all. Andy is barely mentioned in that entire chapter. It was completely pointless. There was no reason for it to be there. It added nothing. That chapter basically just existed to add some trigger warnings for no reason. But even with the other 3 chapters, the only chapter that mentions the kayaking trip, the camp, the other campers is Dina's. And that's at the very end of her chapter, just a couple of sentences directed to Isabel. That's it. None of the girls reference the camp, the trip, really each other in any way in any of their chapters. The reader cannot see how this trip changed these kids' lives because we don't know these kids. We don't have enough time. We're not given any time to know these kids. And not only did we not have any time to get to know these characters, but we don't even know what happens and what the big traumatic event was until the very end. There was no way for us to be able to see like, oh yes, I see how big traumatic event affected these kids throughout the rest of their life. We can't see that if we're not given any time to be able to know these characters and understand the event and how it affected them. I had zero connection to any of these characters, and I really didn't care if anything happened to them, if I'm being completely honest. It's like walking down the sidewalk and stopping for a few minutes to watch a street performance. Entertaining at the time, but you just continue on your way, and by the end of the day, you're not going to remember anything about it. And Siobhan doesn't even get a whole chapter. She gets all of a page and a half at the end of the book. I bet the author would argue that the entire last chapter is about Siobhan and like focused on her just because she put her name in the title of the chapter, but it's not. That last whole chapter has the bear scene, it has the rescue, it has Siobhan rolling around in a field, but that's it. The page and a half that focuses on Siobhan after the event is all that we get about the rest of her life. I was venting at Tien about this book and he said it sounded like a bunch of dramatic nothing. And honestly, that is the only way to describe this book. I gave this a 1 star and I don't think I have ever given a book a 1-star rating. I've given lower ratings, but even with the lower ratings, like a rating under 3 stars, very few and far between. I have never given a 1 star, so you had to do pretty bad for me to give you a 1 star. This book was just so incredibly disjointed from the very beginning, just pointless chapters, very boring events. I don't recommend this, and I do wish that I had maybe done a little more research on the book itself. It had a lot of mixed reviews. The higher ones I obviously disagree with, but I was hoping for an event with these 5 kids who go through this traumatic event. They're lost. No one knows where they are. And maybe they're lost for like just a week. And we get to see like how they survive, how they manage to work with each other or work against each other, and then get to see how this event shapes the rest of their life and how they go through the rest of their life. But we didn't get that. We don't get enough time with the characters to establish any kind of baseline relationship, and we don't really even know what the event is until the very end. And a good amount of the girls' chapters, we'll get a little bit of them pre-camp and then obviously after camp. If I don't know who they are at camp, and especially if I don't know how they were prior to camp, how am I supposed to know if they've changed at all? Don't recommend this book. Very disappointing way to end this summer session. So while The Lost Girls of Camp Forevermore was a very disappointing way to end the first summer camp session, hope is not lost because we have session number 2 coming up. And I've picked 4 more books, and I think I've done a better job about vetting these books this time. The first book is Camp Damascus, which will be my first Chuck Tingle book, and I'm very excited about that. The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. Camp Famous by, I think it's Jennifer Blecker. This one's a middle grade and obviously not a thriller. I haven't read a good middle grade in a hot minute, and this felt like a nice little way to kind of break up the thrillers and mysteries. And the last book is The Lake House by Sarah Beth Durst. So camp session number 1 is done. We had a 5-star, which I was not expecting, but I'm very happy about. 1 that was kind of in the middle, and then 2 that were definitely on the lower end, but that's okay because we have another camp session to go to. Let me know if you've read any of the books mentioned in this video, and if you like them, if you disagree with my opinions. If you haven't read any of these and you just want 1 to pick, please read The God of the Woods. That one you can't go wrong. But thank you for joining me. Great job, campers. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and grab your books because we're not done with camp. We still have a whole other session to go. I'll see you in the next video, campers. Bye.